Hey everybody, this is Michael Oskam from ProWestRecording.com. It's been a while since I made a video, so I apologize. I've been busy working on an album and a new website for you guys. It's being built. I've had a lot of interest from the YouTube community, and I've decided to kind of expand what it is that I do. So proaudiolessons.com is the new site that's going up. It's a membership site, and it's really pretty bitchin'. So more details on that as it is continuing. But I wanted to do a video for all my current subscribers because it's been a little while. It was funny. I was talking to somebody today. I came across one of Lady Antebellum's new songs. I was listening to an RDO playlist, and they came up, and their longtime producer is a guy named Paul Worley. He's based out of Nashville, and he's to my ear, mixing is subjective, but to my ear, the way he mixes things is great. I respect his art form a lot, and so when I hear their record, I don't know if you're a country fan or not. In this business, it pays to not discriminate on genre, because you never know what kind of music record you may be mixing next. So I like Lady Antebellum. I think they're good, but I particularly like the way Paul Worley produces and mixes his records. And so I'm working on a song here for a country artist. This is a song that I wrote. So I have some scratch guitars in there, and I'm building out a drum part. And one of the things I love about how Paul Worley mixes is he gets these great drum tones. And I really recommend listening to one of their records, any one of them that he's done. The record that I'm referring to is their newest one, 747, I think it's called. There's a few tracks on there that sound really killer. He gets great crack from his snare drums, and they sound live. I'm sure he records them out there in Nashville, in a big room, because he gets that big tone, and then I'm sure he layers in samples and all that. So I'm going to show you a little bit of that. Now, in this particular project, this is more of a demo style, so we're not going to be tracking live drums. So I'm using Easy Drummer 2, which I've done some videos with for you guys in the past, so you should be familiar with it. I highly recommend it. And I'm going to take you through kind of how I'm going to get some of these sounds. So let me show you the tune real quick. I'll show you. There's no vocalist on it, but you'll get the idea for what the tune sounds like. Here we go. So pretty cool, right? A lot of it's untouched. This like staccato string part is just an expand patch that hasn't even been EQ'd, because I wanted to start with the rhythm section. So let me explain my routing right here real quick. So on this, on this channel here, I have my Easy Drummer plugin instantiated, and I've built a part by dragging and dropping into Pro Tools' actual edit window, as opposed to building with song blocks down here. Depends on the song. Sometimes I'll build the track down here. Once you take the MIDI track out of Easy Drummer 2, it becomes a different process in terms of editing the MIDI performance. You can obviously open this and move some of these MIDI notes and change the performance if you want, but I found it to be a little bit more simple if you want to edit it within the Easy Drummer plugin. So it's totally your option. Now, in other videos, I've shown you ways to use multiple outputs from within Easy Drummer to bounce stems, so that you can deal with the drums as an audio file, or individual audio files, kick, snare, hat, all that. And that's really helpful. I haven't done that part yet, and I don't always do that. I think you can get good tones with this kind of processing that I have here. I'm going to show you what I'm doing. So I have just a stereo equalization where I'm bringing out the kick fundamental and the octave above it to give it a little bit of punch. And then I'm giving it a little bit of mid-range. And that's kind of a little bit where the beater lives, but that's actually where I really like the crack of the snare drum is right around 980. So that's it, okay? So how I'm getting a little bit of my low end is I have these two sub channels, and I have a split off of my drums to bus 5, and that's the input of these two channels. And then the first thing that I'm doing here is rolling off everything above 110 hertz or so, because all I want to work with is the low end. And then I have a plugin that we all know and love, R-Bass, to give it some harmonic excitement in that area and to kind of beef it up and give it that tone that I'm looking for. And then I have a limiter so that I know that each hit is consistent, and I can set it to be consistent at a level that makes sense. I've been using a lot of the L1 limiters lately on things like this. Very, very helpful. And then I have a duplicate also coming off of bus 5, and instead of doing it the way I did here, I have the old signal generator trick where I have a gate behind a 50 hertz tone, and so that's going at all times, right? There's another video that I have on this if you don't know how to do this. It's a really great trick. And so what it does is the gate is being fed by the side chain, as you can see here, bus 5. And every time the kick drum hits, because of the way that I have it filtered over here, the side chain, as you can see, the key input is on. And then I have the high end rolled off, so it's only opening at information below 84 hertz. So check it out. These are solo safe, so we have it. Notice the gate is not opening on the snare hits. So, very cool. Then what I can do is I can blend with faders, you know what I mean? To taste how much sub I'm getting into my signal here. You know what I mean? So we could essentially bring the subs all the way down and then hit play. You see that kick sample that's in there actually sounds pretty good. And then what we could do is just bring back in there to those lower octaves. And that gives it that whole bottom register that we're lacking a little bit there. So then what I do is I have another split off of my drum channel here, going to a drum parallel compressor auxiliary input here. And I have two here. I have the DBX 160, the new plugin from Waves. It's not a new processor, but a new plugin. And I also have an 1176 because I wasn't quite decided on which one I thought sounded best. And again, that's an exact copy being compressed very heavily. And you can again use faders, right, to kind of set the level. And then again, I would use a limiter here to make sure that it's really kind of where I want it to be. And I'm not limiting to add volume like you would normally think of. Just so that the parallel compression is consistent. Essentially what a compressor does, just with a higher ratio. There's no difference between limiting and compression. If you don't count the ratio, they do the exact same thing. Okay, and then I also have another split coming off of my drum channel that's going to a verb, which is the green aux here. And I have the low end rolled off. If you want a way to mess up your low end, it's to include that frequency range in your reverb sends and returns, because it's just not good. The low energy, the way that it builds up, it makes the whole thing kind of sound washy and not defined, and it doesn't have that clear, crisp low end that we're looking for. So I'm rolling off everything below 244. I could do it even more than that, but let's just leave it around there. And I'm using TrueVerb, which I don't always use. But what I do like about this particular plugin is it has a direct early reflection and reverb selector here. So if in this case all I want is the wet I can turn off the direct signal. So let's listen. So that's just the reverb and the parallel compression and the subs. But all you'll really hear is that snare and that reverb. So I can turn off the direct. Hear that ring out? And if you listen, again, if you listen to Lady Antebellum and Paul Worley stuff, the snare drum reverbs are so pristine. They sound so good that it has to be tracked in a really good space. And then he has some great technique. I mean, he's just very good at what he does. And you can tune the reverb here. The frequency response is editable. So cool, right? That's my drum part. Now I also have my basses, and they are the other part of my rhythm section. And this particular part of the tutorial is very important because it's a part that I struggled with for a long time when I was first starting. And I know that a lot of you guys have written me. I know that a lot of you guys struggle with mixing low-end material because it's not necessarily, our ears are not really, they don't hear that well down there. Okay. And so first of all, that range, I'm talking anywhere from 30 hertz, 20 hertz, 30 hertz to, well, let's just say 250. Most of those frequencies are felt more than they're heard, especially the lower 100 hertz, 100 cycles. 50 hertz, 70 hertz, somewhere in there. That's the thing that you feel. If you were at a concert, that would be the sub, banging on your chest when the kick drum hits. That's more all feeling. You don't really hear that well down there. Our ears hear more in the 1K to 4K range. That's why it's important to obviously mix that range appropriately, because if you have too much going on in that range, then that's where the people's ears can get fatigued. But a lot of times people struggle. And the biggest piece of advice that I'm going to give to you now is, and maybe you've read it somewhere before, but it's absolutely true. You have to decide which instrument is going to take the lead, so to speak, in the rhythm section. So most of the time in pop contemporary music, a rhythm section is consisting of a drum kit, right, and a bass. Well, the bass and the kick cannot occupy that same frequency range equally, because those frequencies, a cycle, if you've ever seen a 100 hertz cycle, they're big. So they fight each other. They want to dominate. And the lower the frequency, the more powerful it is, but you can't hear it. So you might have a 30 hertz tone or somewhere in that range that's just overpowering everything above it, but you can't hear anything and your bottom end just sounds lousy. So a lot of times the bass is competing with the kick drum or vice versa. So you need to decide which one is going to lead. And a lot of that will depend on what kind of song you're doing. If you're doing a dance track, an EDM type song, most of the time, more times than not, in that case, the kick drum is going to be your lead instrument. And that's where you get that whole idea of setting up a side chain compressor on your bass so that when the kick drum hits, it ducks. And then you can put that on synths and anything else so that when the kick drum is hitting the 4 on the floor, the synths are dipping and the bass ducks underneath it. Even if it's just for that split second, the bass can still be heard, but it's taking a back seat to the kick drum. And so that's what I've done here. This is obviously not an EDM track, but that same principle can be applied. So here I have the same bus 5 that I'm using to trigger the key input on these reverb units for my subs. I'm also going to use on this R compressor. I have both of my, I like to use R compressor for this. It's my favorite plugin to use for side chaining. And I don't know why, but it just is. I think it sounds really good. So both of these bass parts, they're mono basses, are being summed together through this auxiliary mono aux here. So on it, I have the R compressor, and I have the key input set to bus 5, and then I have a bass guitar basically preset, and I've kind of toyed with it a little bit just to get the right threshold, and attack is really important when you're doing this too. So the idea is, first let's take a listen to the rhythm section together. We'll bypass this. And what this bass part really is it's the two registers of the bass. It's the lower half and the upper part, because that's where you get that string noise and the kind of fret noise, and you get that buzz and that kind of harmonic content that's exciting that a lot of bass tracks are missing. So what I do is and a lot of times I'll take a bass part, maybe it's DI'd, and I'll duplicate it, and then I'll run them through different processors. So in this case, it's a MIDI bass performance that I've just bounced into an audio file. So this is essentially an audio representation of the MIDI file above it. And so on the, let's see, on this bass, I have this more sub sound. This is the lower register. And I can go through my signal chain real quick. Trans X is a rad plugin used more for drum, right? It's a transient shaper. It's used more for drum processing, but I've found great success with it on bass tracks. And what you'll see that it's doing here is it's adding a lot of punch to the lower register here. If I bypass it, and then on, it's just giving it a lot more attack. Then I have it coming into Guitar Rig 5, which I love, and this is a bass preset that I've tweaked, and I've re-EQ'd it a little bit to give it a little bit more growl, and that's given it a lot of its tone. It's without it. Yeah, I like that. And then I have an EQ, and I have the EQ filtering off everything above 700 hertz or so. And this lower register is what I'm using to sculpt the bottom end of my bass. Now you'll see there's a pretty big cut here of 6-7 dB at 53-ish hertz with a pretty, it's a narrow EQ, but not super narrow. And what that's doing is it's clearing out some space for the kick drum, which as you remember, I have that boosted right here at around 60 hertz. So as the kick drum needs to cut through, remember, one of them has to take a back seat. I've carved out what you could call an EQ hole to accompany the kick drum here. So now it's not going to be non-existent, but it will be less invasive, and therefore clear way for the kick drum to be heard more, clearly and more defined. And so the duplicate is just a higher version of that same bass part. And as you can see, this is where I'm getting a lot of the stringy sound and that upper register. I've started off by filtering everything below. It starts to filter at about the same place, 700 hertz or so. I have it compressing next. Pretty straightforward compression. Ratio 4:1, 3 dB gain reduction at most. Then to give it some more character, I'm using some of Sound Toys, one of my favorite companies. I'm using Devil Lock to give it kind of a lot of its growl, and Decapitator both to give it that sound. And I'll bypass these right here and I'll show you what they're doing. So here it is without. That's pretty incredible, actually. It's also telling me that they're a little loud, because that's not loud. And so here comes Devil Lock. So much more presence. and then decapitator to give it almost a little bit of this sonic distortion. And you bring them together, and it's a pretty rounded out bass sound. Okay, so now all we need to do is put the cherry on top, which is unbypass this compressor, which has the sidechain, is being fed from our kick, and you'll see that, I think the attack should be a little quicker, that the release a little slower. The kick drum is causing the bass part to dip in volume or attenuate, probably, let's see, yeah, around 3, 5, 6 dB for a short period of time. Then what I have is I have them all summing to one rhythm group here, and that's what this mint green channel is. And so everything, all the basses, the subs, are actually going to the mix bus, which is a mistake. So we can put these to the rhythm bus as well. And cool. So now everything is being fed to this mint green, and on it I have Kramer tape, which is I'm using for a little bit of tape compression and some saturation. And then I have my favorite one of my favorite drum compressors, the FG Gray from Slate Digital. And so let's listen to just the rhythm. All right, let me bypass the stereo compressor here. And you can see that I'm gonna throw a limiter on this as well, just not really limiting, just preventing those peaks from clipping out. And you can see that the mid-range really comes alive with the FG Gray bypass. And the low end, everything glues together really nicely there. And then let me show you without Kramer tape. That's unbelievable. Very good. Another plugin you may want to consider using is some sort of console emulation, and they've really gotten very good. There's a one from Waves that's amazing. There's one from Slate Digital. The one from Waves is called the NLS. You can use the channel or the bus. In this case, I would use the bus because it's a group. You could put an NLS channel on every single rhythm part or the entire session if you wanted. That'd be a little taxing on your system. Slate Digital's plugins run a little bit more lightweight, so you would be able to instantiate the virtual mix rack and put the VCC channel on each and every part. But if you just want to be able to mix them as a group, you can certainly use the VCC mix bus emulation here. And it, as you know, it has the SSL, the E and the G. It has the API, the Neve, the Trident, the tube console. Really great sounds. That came out recently. I have a video on that if you guys want to check it out. For this one, I feel like I'm going to use NLS though, the nonlinear summing from Waves, and this is a Neve, this is SSL, and this is I think it's like, I'm not sure, to be honest with you. So, but you can click through those and decide which sound you like. So let's figure out what we like here. I always like to turn the drive up a bit. I'll overdo it at first so that we know. This plugin will start to break up once you're driving it too hard. It's really strange. I always land on whenever I'm using the NLS, I always land on Nevo, and for some reason that particular emulation fits my ear well, and I like it. So let's use that. I'm gonna drive it actually pretty hard and just back off like a trim knob it has, and that way we won't get any sort of digital artifacts or clipping. So let me show you basically what the drum that is basically what the that is what Easy Drummer sounds like on its own. And it's a great plugin. It sounds pretty cool. But once you start adding in everything else, this is just the subgroup, and then we can bring in our subs. There we go. Let's turn back on the EQ. I actually liked it without these being fed hard. And then of course we can bring in our parallel compression, and then we get that reverb. And then our basses. And the whole song. Now obviously there's a lot more that's going to go into the mixing of this track, but I just wanted to give you an idea of how I would start putting together the rhythm elements in this kind of mix. I thought I'd put some love out there in the world for Paul Worley and Lady Antebellum's newest record. Very, very good. And, you know, people like myself have been doing this for a long time. You know, professionals in the industry still look to other professionals. So trust me. And you've heard me mention in other videos that reference tracks are incredibly important. If you want your track to sound like a Paul Worley track, bring one of the Lady A's songs into your session and start dissecting the way he's arranged it and mixed it, and get it, you know, single out those snare hits and just see how he gets that sound, and then just make your record sound like that. I mean, it sounds really, you know, straightforward. It's not that simple, and we all know that. But hopefully with studying and continuing watching videos from me and other people, you'll have the tool set and the skill set rather to know how to create the tones that you're hearing and that you love so much. So please, guys, subscribe if you haven't already, and also keep an eye out in the coming month or two. ProAudioLessons.com will be going live, and I really urge you guys. It'll have a free section filled with content similar to this particular YouTube channel, and then it'll also have a paid, more intensive membership that you can try and see if it's something that you can benefit from. I know that it is. So again, Michael Oskam from Pro West Recording and ProAudioLessons.com. I hope you guys have a good evening. Later.